So this is the law of explosive growth. Okay. So the law of explosive growth says that if you want to add growth, then you will lead followers. Okay. So those are people that just want to follow. But if you want to multiply growth, then you will lead leaders. Okay. So distinction between those things, not necessarily bad. You just have to make a decision if you want to continue to lead followers or lead leaders. And John kind of distinguishes between those two. He talks about this idea of followers math versus the leaders math, right? Followers math is just kind of like, okay, one by one by one. And a leader's math is multiplication, where you lead one and then they're leading 10, and they're leading 10, and the numbers start to compound. So there's a compounding effect where you could lead 1,000 followers, or you could lead 100 leaders that lead 100 leaders, right? So there's a compound effect that happens when you're looking at those two. Leaders tend to pick it up faster, they take it and start applying it, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of, that's the thesis of this concept. And what he goes through is he starts to delineate between the two, of leaders who attract followers versus leaders who attract leaders. Okay. So he says the characteristics of a leader who attracts followers is they need to be needed. Okay. Versus they want to be succeeded. So one person just says, well, I need to be needed all the time. And so I'm going to keep myself in the fray so that I never lose my own neediness. The other side of the coin is they leader to leaders that says, I just want to be succeeded. So I'm trying to hand the baton off because I'm not trying to self-preserve, so to speak, right? So that's the first delineation between the leaders who attract followers versus leaders who attract leaders. The second one is the leaders who attract followers will develop the bottom 80%, or the bottom 80% of the people that really are not wanting to grow or lead or become a leader. And the leaders who attract leaders will develop the top 20%. Remember, he goes back to that whole 80-20 rule. So he kind of delineates investment, right? He says the leaders who attract followers will focus on the weaknesses versus leaders who attract leaders focus on the strengths. Okay. So what that means is continuing to try to say, where is this person's gifting? How are they wired? What are they best suited to do? And then try to lean into that, right? So it's continuing to move towards those things for their particular giftings. Leaders who attract leader or followers treat everyone the same versus leaders who attract leaders treat everyone differently. Now, what he says here as an asterisk is not that everybody's valuable. That's not the issue here. Not everybody doesn't have the same worth. What he's trying to say is leaders will reward and give more benefit to the ones that are rock stars, right? I mean, it's just kind of natural sort of order of what you have to do if you're going to keep focusing on it. He goes on to say leaders who attract followers grow by addition, Leaders who attract leaders grow by multiplication. And then the final one is leaders who attract followers impact only people they touch. Leaders who attract leaders impact people beyond their touch.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are your thoughts or comments about this notion of the law of explosive growth?
Yeah, I like the idea of leaders that develop leaders because they basically lead through them to then expand that and grow it. It replicates, where followers, unfortunately, like everyone has their area, but like they're not going to be the people that are going to take what they learn and pass that down to other followers, because the followers are usually just kind of waiting for direction. And so I think everyone has their place and everyone's valuable. You just kind of know, hey, I'm not hardwired to be a leader, but I do like to take direction. I like to do what I'm asked to do, and that's it. And that's great. That's at least you know that about yourself. But then the leaders will be the ones that will take the learnings, pass that down, replicate that. And I think that's where that thousands comes in, is where leaders will just create more leaders and more leaders as they go.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point, Dan.
Yeah, I think it definitely comes down to a case of, doing more with less. If you're, if you're developing those who can lead, and you're developing only the top 20%, of your sphere, but you're still touching more people. It's not just direct contact to lead those, those that you're leading. It's like a major efficiency thing, and it's a shame that more people can't take that approach. But then I think there's also probably a need for having those that just want to attract followers in some cases. It could be, there potentially could be some benefits there, in certain roles and environments, like army, military, things like that. Probably, might be a good spot for that. But as far as especially like in like community though, leaders that attract leaders, that could be like, that's way more explosive for I guess improving a community, and outreaching that way. I think that's a good thing to a good way to handle that. So
yeah, for sure. So I met with a group out in Texas when I was out there called New Generations.
Mhm.
And it's a ministry thing, but I thought it was really, I was blown away at what they had accomplished with this whole model, leading leaders, et cetera, et cetera. So they've done this for 18 years. And with the way they've led this with a very small executive team, they have gone to 59 countries. They have planted 117,336 churches.
wow.
They have started 195 disciple-making movements, 9 to 940 people groups, 2.4 million people have followed Christ as a result of it. That's a religious thing, but I think it applies. I mean, blew my mind as to, and he said it's just a very simple baton leadership handing to the next one, and he says they just keep doing it over and over and over again, and they have this whole tree of just, I mean, there's so much like information. I was just like blown away at the leadership and how they went ahead and did it. And I asked them, I'm like, well, what's the budget? You guys must have a huge budget, because it's a massive organization.
Mhm.
I mean, think about the amount of people. So I'm thinking, 100 million a year. He said we run at $77 million a year.
Wow.
Wow.
Like what? Because we have no offices. It's like, oh my gosh.
That's
So
wild.
point is that this whole idea of a leadership model of leaders to leaders, it really works.
Mhm.
If it's applied, but it's